Good to see you this morning. Thank you for being here, whether you're in here or whether you're not in here. Most of our lesson message this morning comes from Matthew chapter 22. The context or the setting for what we're going to discuss this morning is that Jesus has come to Jerusalem. It is the last week of his life. As a matter of timing, it's Tuesday. He's going to die on Friday. He has arrived at Jerusalem and he's teaching. He tells so many parables. We often read about his institution of the Last Supper. That's Matthew 26. We're at Matthew 22. The chapter before is as he enters Jerusalem. So here he is in Jerusalem. It's just before Passover. It's the most holy time of the Jews' life. We celebrate, if you'll give me the leeway to say something like the Christian Passover, we just did that. Very big deal that we partook of our Passover lamb. This is the week that they're getting ready for that. If you'll forgive this expression as well, Christmas is on Friday, it's Tuesday. Again, that's inaccurate, but it gives you the idea of how excited people are and what's going on in Jerusalem. And during this time, the Pharisees come to him and they attempt to trap him, and they do it by the dirtiest means necessary, or the dirtiest means possible. They do it with politics. So let's pick up the story of what is going on in Matthew 22, starting in verse 15. Then the Pharisees went and plotted how to entangle him in his words. And they sent their disciples to him, along with the Herodians, saying, "Teacher, we know that you are true and teach the way of God faithfully, and you do not care about anyone's opinion, for you are not swayed by appearances. Tell us then, what do you think? Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not?" But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, "Why do you put me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin for the tax." And they brought him a denarius. And Jesus said to them, "Whose likeness and inscription is this?" They said, "Caesar's." Then he said to them, "Therefore render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." And when they heard it, they marveled, and they left him and went away. This is a trap. Make no mistake, this is a trap. They are attempting to entrap him. The wording that is used at the beginning of what is going on here is they plotted how to entangle him with his words, and they sent their disciples and the Herodians. These are the two words that I'll ask us to focus on. We'll talk about it being a trap later on in the message. But these two thoughts here, they plotted and they sent. They thought it up and then they did something about it. It was premeditated. It was purposeful. And I want you to not think that it was done in a hurry, or that it was done, hey, here's an idea, let's go do that, and boom, they all just went and did that. This is plotted out. This is purposeful, and it's a really good trap. It's not a, hey, maybe. They planned ahead, and they got, this is a really good trap. It's baited well. The wording that's used is that to be ensnared, to entangle him, is like putting a piece of bait down and then to catch something. It is the word that a fowler would use to catch a bird in a net. There is premeditation, and it's not an offhand idea. So let's examine the examination. They send him the Herodians and their disciples as witness. The Herodians are going to be the active participants here. The Herodians come to him and say, "Teacher, we know that you are true and teach the way of God truthfully." No, they don't. This is the whole story that you get in another location in the Gospels where they say, "Good teacher," and Jesus is like, wait, stop right there. Who are you calling good? You can't just call people good. No one is good except the Father. So they come to Jesus and they say, we know you are true and you teach the way of God truthfully. This is as bold-faced a lie as when Jasmine looks at Jafar and says, Jafar, I never noticed how handsome you are. Yeah, Jeannie's mouth hits the floor. It's not hidden. This is a bold-faced lie. We know you are true. No, they don't. It's a lie. They're trying to butter him up. It's a big compliment. Tell any preacher that they are preaching the Word of God. They'll say, that was my agenda from the beginning when I sat down to write it out. I thought, I should pray. God, let me get this right. Put none of my own need on it and all of what needs to happen, what needs to come from the Word of God. And they pose him a question. The question is verse 17, is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Any answer that he gives here is going to cause problems. This is a tactic the Pharisees have used. They know how to ask questions where the only answer that you can give is one where you get trapped. My debate teacher in high school was really good at this. The question that I was given was, should a student with AIDS be allowed to play basketball in the gym with all the other kids? Well, I went with the legal stance. You can't tell them no, you can't force them to do medical treatment. Yes, you have to let them play. Boy, I got eviscerated by mostly the girls in the class about the safety of children. If you'd pick the other side, you'd have got eviscerated by those who are legalistic about, well, you're just excluding anybody now, aren't you? There's no good answer. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? They've used this tact before. They use it in John chapter 8. They bring him a woman caught in the very act of adultery and say, do we stone her or not? Because if you stone her, it's illegal. And if you don't, you're breaking the law of God. So whose law do we break? Roman law or God's law? Jesus' answer there is that he bends down and writes in the dirt. That's his first answer. They ask him about his authority. And again, a question where if he answers one way, they'll react violently. And if he answers in a different way, they're still going to react violently. There's no good answer. So Jesus comes back and says, I'm not going to answer your question. There's no answer I can give you that will be satisfactory to you. And so Jesus' response here is not to answer the question, but to call them out. You're a bunch of hypocrites. You don't care what the answer is. You ask a question and you don't care what the answer is. So why did they ask it? Because they're playing politics. Why would they ask it? In verse... I don't know where I'm at in the slideshow now. I'm so sorry. In verse 15, the Herodians are sent by the Pharisees. They know what they're doing and they know who they are sending. You probably, or you may not know who the Herodians are. That wording doesn't mean very much to us. The Herodians are a sect of Jews who desire to restore the nation of Israel as a world power. The Herodians want to see Israel as a world power, like when David ran the country, like when Solomon ran the country. We want to see a reestablishment of God's nation on earth. There's still a sect of, they're not even, not necessarily only Jews anymore. Perhaps you would hear of them in the news called Zionists. They want to see Israel as a world power. And I think it was 1947-48 that they became a world power again. They have a piece of land. They are a nation. The Herodians wanted to see that grow. So, do you pay taxes to another country or not? Is it right or not? Are we God's people or not? This is a good question. Do we pay tax? Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? And then we'll send the right people. We'll send the militant, ardent believers to go ask this question. They're cocking the gun. They're loading it, cocking the gun, they're pointing it, and they're saying, here you go, go ask him a question. And the Herodians go and ask Jesus the question they want answered. Do you support us or not? Oh, and by the way, when they get there, it's, oh, wonderful Jesus who teaches with the authority of God. Here's a big giant compliment. We love you so much. Support us. It's a good trap. It's a real good trap. They have a natural disdain for Roman rule. This is a question they would probably ask anybody anyway. If you eat supper with them, it probably comes up in conversation. How much of a supporter are you? Not to mention the peer pressure of all the people that just showed up. They start with a compliment. You've probably done this. You've probably seen this. You've probably answered this. Mommy, can I have, or Mommy, dearest, you're so sweet. I love you so much. Can I have? You have. I know I have. I've done this. You butter them up and then you ask a question, hoping to get the answer you want. By the way, Jesus has bigger fish to fry. What's going to happen in 3 days? Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. What's going to happen in 3 days? He's going to die. He's going to die for them. And then they hit him with this question. If Jesus say, pay the tax to Caesar, then the answer that he's giving them is, in essence, I don't have regard for the compliment that you have paid me. And he is allowing them to pull the trigger of the loaded gun that the Pharisees have set up. They have sent the military to go ask a question. They have sent the mob to go ask the question. So if he says pay the tax, he is going to trigger them to make furious actions. At the very least, whether they riot right now or not, he's made an enemy. An enemy out of a whole section, a whole subgroup of people. Ask Bevan how that works out when you anger a whole subgroup of people. If he says, don't pay the tax, then he's inciting he's inciting civil disorder. So they go call the cop and they say, hey, take him to jail. He says that he is a king, or he says that we should not render to Caesar what is Caesar's. He is saying we shouldn't pay taxes. He's starting a coup or a rebellion. This is a really, really good trap. The problem is they're trying to play politics with the King of Kings. Jesus is better at politics than they, if you'll allow that, which may be considered a sin to some too. Jesus is better at identifying what the question is, identifying what the answer is, and then giving the godly, the scriptural, the correct, the only satisfactory answer. He says, show me the coin. Let's identify what is on the coin. A quarter has you'd think I could get George, right? A quarter has George Washington on it, right? Pull out a bill, pull out a dollar bill, and look on the back of it if you'd like. It says, for all debts, both, I'm going to get in trouble with my teachers, both private and public and private, all debts, public and private. It has the power of the United States that says this is worth something. This dollar bill, this coin, this amount of money, it's worth something because the government will back up the fact that if nobody else will take that money, the government will say that has value. I will give you a value, whether a good, service, or a different form of money. I will give you value for that thing that you have that is value. So show me what it is that you have that has value. How would you pay this tax? It looks like Caesar, right? It belongs to Caesar. It is Caesar's. It's got his face on the front. And this is what he begins with. That is, at the beginning of verse 21, they said, Caesar's. Therefore, render to Caesar what is Caesar's. Then he puts pressure on them and calls them out for being sinners. Render to God the things that are God's. How is that calling them out? We'll get there. And how is Jesus better at politics? Because when he gets in a political argument, they leave amazed. Who can do that? That doesn't happen on Facebook. That hardly ever happens in person. When you get in a political argument with somebody walks away thinking, wow, they really knew what they were doing. When they heard it, they marveled, and they left him and went away. So what is this render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's? Well, the coin is made in the likeness of Caesar. It's only as good as Caesar. When the Roman government falls, it's not worth anything anymore. Well, there'll be some value to it, but it won't be backed by the full faith and assurance of the Roman government. Money is empowered by the nation that issues it. We looked at this a couple of years back when they were talking about lowering the credit rating of the United States. What does that matter? Well, that means your dollar, which is worth $1, is now worth 90 cents. It was worth 100 cents, and now it's really only worth 90 cents. That's a very basic. I'm not an economy expert for sure. But when the government folds, so does its currency. Confederate bills were worth something, and now they're collector's items. You can sell them, but you can't pay for a soda at the gas station with Confederate dollar bills. They don't have a government to back and to value them. You're probably thinking of a place that I don't know of. Well, how about this one? In Iran, they use a rial. It's R-I-A-L. I don't know how to say it. Rial. Iran uses the Iranian rial. And if you went to Iran, to the U.S. embassy there, to the rate of exchange, and you gave them $1 US, they would give you 42,105 Iranian rial. It costs 20,000 Iranian rial to buy one of the most cheap vegetables that they have, fruits that they have. It's 20,000 rial for an apple. For an apple. It's about 50 cents. If you went to Wendy's and got the big combo, it'd be like 500,000 rial. It's not worth anything because it's backed by the government. The government's not worth anything. Or the government at least can say, we can't give you value for that. I can't give you value for the money. Jesus' point is, if it belongs to Caesar, give it to him. That thing doesn't have any value anyway, except to Caesar. And render to God the things that are God's. That's the end of verse 21. Let's read all of the verse. They said, Caesar's. Then he said to them, therefore render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. How is that calling them out for sin? Okay, the coin is made in the image of Caesar. What is made in the image of God? You are. Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 and 27. Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let him have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, both male and female. He created them. Okay, little boys and little girls are made in the image of God. Did it stop with Adam and Eve? No. Chapter 5, verse 3. When Adam had lived 130 years, he fathered a son in his own likeness. After his image, he named him Seth. So this is a continuing thing. It goes down. Not just Adam and Eve are created in the likeness of God, but this is something that perpetuates and continues. In chapter 9 and verse 6, after the flood, whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For God made man in his own image. What is made in the image of God? You. Okay, render to God the things that are God's. Just like it wasn't required that, it feels like it, but taxes don't make you give all your money back to the government. God says, I need you to give something back to me. let's let that be a substantial portion of who we are. Because God does require for us to give back to Him of ourselves. In Acts chapter 17, starting in verse 30, the times of ignorance God overlooked, but now He commands all people everywhere to repent, because He has fixed a day on which He will judge the world in righteousness by a man whom He has appointed, and of this He has given assurance to all by raising Him from the dead. Have you ever heard of the day of judgment being likened to being assessed by the IRS, being audited by the IRS? On that day, God will call into account whether you have given Him everything He has requested of you or not. He's a merciful God. He is a gracious God. But you have to give Him what is due Him. And Jesus says, give Caesar what belongs to Caesar. What belongs to God, give Him that. What belongs to God, we should belong to God. And we should never cheat on our taxes. So render to Caesar what is Caesar, and render to God what is God's. It's not the first time Jesus has made this point, although He uses different wording. In Matthew chapter 6 and verse 24, Jesus says, you got to pick. You can't let the coin stand on edge. You can't balance between one and the other. You'll either belong to God or you won't. So what will you choose? The thing that belongs to Caesar? You'll enjoy the value of this world and get everything out of it you can. You'll squeeze every last dime you can out of every nickel you own? Or will we give to God what is God? The Iranian real has no value because its government can't say it's worth something. It is inflated, and not only inflated, but also devalued. Apparently there's a difference. I don't know what it is. But apparently there's a difference. We have Damon. Damon can help us with that maybe. And if not, Hunter will be able to later. Everything of this world is losing value. And it's all inflating. In fact, it's a bunch of gas, hot air for the most part, to take your eye off of where it ought to be, serving God. Because that which is God's has value. It has ultimate value. And one soul is worth more than the entire world. And your soul was worth Jesus dying on a cross for it, for you. You will never lose your value. You can throw your money away, but it'll never lose its value. Your soul is valuable because it is made in the likeness of the King of Kings. It is made in the likeness of an unchangeable, unperishable, all-knowing, everlasting, eternal God. Can we render to God the things that are God's?